and welcome. Question of the day. Are you confusing being happy with your job with being engaged? Or if you are a leader, are you confusing employees who love their job with being engaged, highly engaged, or engaged to some degree? So, this topic came up for a couple of reasons. There was a couple of weeks ago when I was having a conversation with a colleague, and we were talking about employee engagement and all of the different factors that roll into it. And then it was a couple of days ago when there was a social media post about pay, and the story essentially was that the person enjoys getting paid, they enjoy their paycheck, and they're wondering, why does anything more need to happen in the work that they do because they're getting a paycheck? So why do they have to go above and beyond? And so before we get into a little bit more of this today, well, actually, sorry, before I share that, I think that this is so important because you can be totally into the paycheck. You can be into you can love your day-to-day task, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are engaged, and there can be a disconnection there. And so that's what we're going to get into today. Now, what I wanted to say just a few minutes ago, or few moments ago, was that I do have a document, what I call the employee engagement continuum, which is essentially a spectrum that describes what engagement can look like when there's high engagement, medium engagement, low engagement, and completely disengaged versus job satisfaction or loving one's job. And if that is something that you are interested in, so that if you are a leader and you're trying to gauge better what's happening, either you can comment or you can send me a message and let me know, hey, you're looking for this document. Just let me know. You can one word engage, whatever the case may be, and I will be happy to send that over to you so that way you can have it, and hopefully it's something that is useful for you. Okay. So, welcome everyone, and let me know when you're joining in. If you're joining in, I absolutely love having these conversations with you. We are talking about employee engagement versus loving your job, because it is not the same. And I realize that as myself, as I talk about employee engagement, and I have other colleagues that talk about employee engagement, it is really important for us to define clearly what employee engagement is. So let's talk about what are some of the distinctions between job satisfaction and engagement. So when we look at job satisfaction, this is something that leans more towards being transactional. This is something where you may love your paycheck, you may love the hours, you may love the perks, you may love the benefits, you may love the team that you work with, but it is you are satisfied with your job for those very reasons. On the other side of engagement, what we have is we have something that is more transformational. This is based off of purpose. This is based on meaning. This is how your role in the day to day, in the daily work that you do, how does it connect to something bigger? How does it connect to the mission? How does it connect to the overall organizational team or departmental goals? And the challenge is that when you look at job satisfaction, what you are seeing, especially as a leader who is looking at their team, what you're seeing is you're seeing individuals who they love the paycheck, they love, the day to day, but they're not engaged. And the danger comes in because now we have individuals that are constantly needing that transaction in order to be happy with their job. And the if an employee is never not loving but engaged in what they do, if they don't see the meaning and if they don't see the purpose, then what happens is that when you have moments of crisis, it's hard to have anyone that's fully pulling through. It's hard to have innovation. It is hard to have, whenever there are changes, alignment with the company, if someone is not seeing, how do I go above and beyond that? And that is why engagement is so important on your team. And you think about the story of the scenario where the person is saying, hey, I want this paycheck, and that's fine. But because it is transactional and because it is internally motivated, as a leader, you're constantly going to be trying to figure out, okay, so how do I ensure that this person's needs are met? How do I ensure that the paycheck is there? How do I ensure that the team is there? And that's a lot of work. That's not to say that we completely forego it altogether. But if there is meaning and purpose and that is described and that is shared, that is where you are going to find an increase in engagement. So here's why it truly matters. When employees, when they struggle to identify how their output, how that lines into the bigger picture, many times you have leaders who they'll come and they'll share a more of the mission statement, but it's more generic. It's not really hitting in on this is why each individual's role matters. This is how each individual's role is something that is important to our overall goals. And the challenge with that is that those are speeches or those are visions that nobody's relating to. No, but that people are struggling with relating, okay, so this is cool for the company, but how does this relate to me as a person? And so that's the challenge. And so how do we fix this? How do we fix engagement by not assuming that loving your job means that someone is engaged? Well, the fix or the way for us to address this is to address by a contribution gap bridge. So we're bridging what someone does, and you're bridging that to how does this help the overall mission? How does this help the overall goal? So now I have homework for everybody. So the homework, if you are, so I'll cover everyone first, whether you're an individual contributor or a leader, and then we'll jump into, we'll spend a little bit more time on homework for a leader. If you're leading a team or you're leading an organization, what can you do to fix it? So first, let's start off with everyone. When you look, and this is something that you can do starting tomorrow, on Monday, or whatever your tomorrow is. When you look at your biggest goal for this quarter, I want you to look at where do you feel your daily task ties into impact? Where does your daily task tie into impact? And where do you feel you are disconnected from it? So that's homework for everybody. Look at the biggest goal for this quarter, this past quarter, or maybe even this future quarter coming up, and where do your daily tasks, how does that tie into that goal versus how do you feel disconnected from it? So whether you're a leader or not. Now, if you are a leader, because there is more leverage that you have in that role, here is what I want you to do to help your team engage more versus just loving their job, because it's not the same. Your goal tomorrow is to have a specific conversation with your team and to help them to understand how their role helps to meet specific milestones, how it helps to meet specific goals, and show them how their role ties into the bigger picture. Now, if you're just joining in, we are talking about the fact that employee engagement and loving your job is not the same. You can have someone that loves the perk. They love their paycheck. Absolutely. I'm not going to argue with that. I love my paycheck too. And you have individuals who love their team, but that doesn't mean that they are engaged. Engagement is about purpose. Engagement is about having meaning and understanding that. So now our ultimate goal this week, our ultimate goal when it comes to employee engagement versus loving your job is that when an employee realizes, that their specific role matters, their motivation shifts from being purely transactional into something that is impactful. It shifts from just wondering about when am I going to get this next paycheck to how can I create impact. And that is not to say that This is a stance for underpaying people, and this is a stance for having a toxic work environment. But this is about how can we create an environment where people understand the role that they play, reminding them that engagement requires everyone everyone to take part and to realize just how beneficial they are. Now, I mentioned before earlier in this live stream that I have a document. Whether you're an individual contributor or a leader and you're curious about how can I understand the impact that I make, be sure to type your let me know in the whether it's in the chat or whether you send me a direct message or an email, and let me know that you want that continuum or that spectrum that essentially identifies what are the 5 different phases that anyone may go through when it comes to engagement, because it's not just engaged or disengaged. It is, maybe there is a complete disengagement. Maybe there's low engagement. Maybe there is medium engagement. What does that look like? And what can you as a leader do in order to increase that engagement? All right. So, as we prepare to wrap up, I want you all to think about, if you have any questions, feel free to type your questions in the chat. Feel free to type your comments in the chat. I would absolutely love to hear from you. I enjoy these weekly conversations. If this is your first time watching, I go live every Sunday at 5:30 and Central Time. And we talk about different things that are focused on workplace dynamics, that are focused on employee engagement, and my favorite, workplace value. So I don't see any comments here yet, but I'm going to get ready to head out, y'all. Either way, because my 15 minutes is coming up and it's time to go. But this has been so great. And if you have questions or comments throughout the week, feel free to reach out. Send me a message if you want that document, or comment on this video if you want that document, and I will send that to you. All right, y'all, this has been wonderful. Please remember that in everything you do, remember to stay adding value. Okay, y'all have a great one. Bye. I got to figure out how to close out, y'all. Bye, y'all.